Prince Harry's address in Kyiv stands as one of the most effective pieces of wartime rhetoric delivered by a non-state actor in recent years. It succeeds because it is grounded, morally clear, and strategically intelligent. He speaks with authority, but avoids pretense. He speaks with emotion, but avoids sentimentality. That balance gives the speech its force. His credibility is carefully constructed and entirely persuasive. When Prince Harry says, "I am not here as a politician," he is not retreating from politics. He is elevating the discussion above politics. He invokes three identities instead. He is a soldier, humanitarian, and friend. Each carries emotional and practical weight. His military service gives him legitimacy in speaking about war. His work with the Invictus Games gives him moral authority on recovery and trauma, and his repeated visits to Ukraine, this is his third, gives him credibility as a witness, not a distant commentator. This is classical ethos. It is earned, not claimed. The speech is structured around clarity. He returns again and again to that word. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what's at stake. Clarity about who carries the burden. This repetition works as a rhetorical anchor throughout the speech. In a war filled with disinformation and ambiguity, clarity becomes a moral act. He positions Ukraine not as a distant conflict, but as a test case for the entire international system. That move is subtle but decisive. It reframes the war from a regional struggle into a global moral question. It gives it urgency. And his analysis of the nature of the war is also unusually direct. He rejects euphemism. This is not complex global politics. This is deliberate aggression, he says. He names the violation of the Budapest Memorandum. He explains the consequences. When such guarantees collapse, every international promise weakens. This is a point where many politicians might try to avoid stating the facts because the facts carry uncomfortable implications for Western credibility. Harry does not avoid it. He sharpens it. The facts are clear. The Budapest Memorandum was signed by the USA, by Britain, by Russia. And in return for surrendering the nuclear arsenal, Ukraine was offered support by these countries. Support by these countries, one of which has invaded Ukraine. The speech becomes more powerful when it turns to the human cost. And here he moves from abstraction to genuine reality, trauma, exhaustion, families under strain. He understands that war does not end when the shooting stops. His line, "War is not only fought on the battlefield, it is fought in the mind," captures modern conflict with precision. This is a war of attrition, not only in territory, but in psychology. That insight aligns with what we know about Russian strategy.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so we can continue building a space where we focus on thoughtful conversations, meaningful analysis, and the real impact behind global stories. Today's discussion is centered on something that often gets lost in the noise: recognition. Not the kind driven by trending headlines or fleeting reactions, but recognition that comes from careful observation, from consistency over time, and from a deeper understanding of what meaningful engagement actually looks like. And at the center of this conversation is Prince Harry. His recent presence in Ukraine has drawn global attention, but more importantly, it has prompted serious reflection from voices that analyze global affairs with depth and context. Among those voices is Tim Wilson, whose perspective offers something increasingly rare: measured, thoughtful recognition of substance over spectacle. Because when someone grounded in analysis and critical thinking looks at a public figure and highlights their conduct in a serious context like Ukraine, it shifts the conversation. It moves it away from surface-level commentary and into something more meaningful. And that is exactly what has happened here. Professor Tim Wilson made a statement that deserves to be fully understood. He said that Prince Harry may not be a politician, but he demonstrates a level of statesmanship that is remarkable. Now, that is not just a compliment, that is an assessment. Statesmanship is a term that carries weight. It speaks to qualities like responsibility, maturity, judgment, and the ability to navigate complex and sensitive environments with clarity and purpose. It is a term often reserved for individuals in positions of formal power. So when it is used to describe someone outside of political office, it immediately raises an important question. What is it about Prince Harry's actions that reflects those qualities? To answer that, we need to look beyond a single visit or a single speech. We need to look at patterns, because patterns reveal intention, and intention is what separates meaningful engagement from momentary attention. Prince Harry's involvement with Ukraine has not been limited to one appearance. It has been consistent. He has shown up, and he has continued to show up. That consistency is not accidental. It reflects a level of commitment that goes beyond visibility. Anyone can appear once. Anyone can make a statement. But returning, again and again, demonstrates something deeper. It demonstrates that the issue matters enough to remain engaged with. It demonstrates that the people affected are not being treated as a temporary focus. And that is where the foundation of credibility begins. Now, let's talk about presence, because presence is one of the most powerful yet often overlooked aspects of humanitarian engagement. When Prince Harry is physically present in Ukraine, it is not just symbolic. It carries meaning, it signals attention, it signals respect, it signals that the situation is not being observed from a distance but engaged with directly, and presence has a human impact. It shows individuals on the ground that they are seen, that their experiences are acknowledged, that their reality matters on a global stage. Now combine that presence with consistency, and something even more powerful emerges: trust. Because when people see someone return, not once but multiple times, it builds a sense of reliability. It shows that the engagement is not driven by convenience or timing. It is sustained, and sustained presence is one of the clearest indicators of genuine commitment. This is exactly the kind of pattern that Professor Tim Wilson is recognizing. He is not reacting to a moment. He is observing a trajectory. Now let's connect this to a central pillar of Prince Harry's humanitarian work: the Invictus Games Foundation. The Invictus Games are more than a sporting event. They are a global movement centered on resilience, recovery, and dignity. They provide a platform for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel to reclaim their sense of identity and purpose. They shift the narrative from loss to strength, from limitation to possibility. Now think about how that connects to Ukraine. Ukraine is experiencing the realities of conflict on a daily basis. There are individuals dealing with physical injuries, psychological trauma, displacement, and long-term uncertainty. And in that context, Prince Harry's work with the Invictus Games is not separate from his engagement with Ukraine. It is directly relevant. It is aligned. It is part of the same broader mission. And alignment matters. Because when someone's actions across different areas reinforce each other, it shows consistency of purpose. It shows that the work is not fragmented. It is cohesive. It is intentional. And this is where the idea of statesmanship becomes even more meaningful. Statesmanship is not just about making decisions at the highest level. It is about how someone conducts themselves in complex situations. It is about how they engage with people, how they communicate, how they navigate sensitive environments. And one of the most important aspects of statesmanship is balance. The ability to be present without dominating, the ability to speak without inflaming, the ability to support without overstepping. And this is where Prince Harry's approach stands out. He does not present himself as a policymaker. He does not claim authority over decisions. He does not position himself as someone who controls outcomes. Instead, he speaks as someone who understands service, as someone who understands the human cost of conflict, as someone who is there to support, to listen, and to advocate. And that distinction is critical, because it allows him to engage in a way that is grounded, respectful, and effective. Now let's talk about the broader impact of this kind of engagement, because it extends far beyond the immediate context. When someone with global visibility consistently engages with an issue like Ukraine, it helps sustain attention. It keeps the issue in the public consciousness. It prevents it from being overshadowed by the constant flow of news stories. And in today's world, where attention shifts rapidly, that is incredibly important. Because humanitarian crises do not end when they stop trending. They continue. And they require sustained awareness. They require continued engagement. They require voices that keep reminding the world that the situation is ongoing. And that is exactly what Prince Harry's actions contribute to. Now let's talk about credibility again, because it is central to this entire discussion. Credibility is not something that can be declared. It is something that must be built. Over time. Through consistent action. Through alignment between words and behaviour. Through a pattern of engagement that demonstrates authenticity. And this is where Prince Harry's work becomes particularly significant. His words align with his actions. His presence aligns with his message. His engagement aligns with his history. And that alignment is what creates credibility. It is what allows observers like Professor Tim Wilson to look at the bigger picture and recognize something meaningful. Because credibility is visible, especially to those who are paying close attention. Now let's expand further on the idea of influence. There is a common belief that influence is tied directly to formal power, that to have an impact, you must hold office, make policy, or control decisions. But what Prince Harry's example shows is that influence can take different forms. Influence can come from consistency, from credibility, from presence, from a clear sense of purpose, and this type of influence operates differently. It is not constrained by political structures. It is not limited by official roles. It is flexible. It is human-centered. And it can be incredibly effective in raising awareness, building connections, and sustaining attention. Now let's also consider the importance of recognition from voices like Professor Tim Wilson. Because not all recognition carries the same weight. Recognition from analysts, academics, and individuals who engage with global issues at a serious level is grounded in evaluation. It is based on context, on understanding, on the ability to see patterns over time. So when Professor Tim Wilson offers his perspective, it reflects a thoughtful assessment, an assessment that looks beyond immediate reactions and focuses on substance. And that is what makes it valuable. Now, let's take a step back and reflect on the bigger picture. Because this is not just about one individual, it is about what his actions represent. Prince Harry's engagement with Ukraine reflects a broader model of humanitarian involvement, a model that emphasizes presence, consistency, and alignment, a model that prioritizes people over politics, a model that demonstrates that meaningful impact does not always require formal authority, and this model is important because it offers an alternative way of thinking about influence and engagement. It shows that individuals can contribute meaningfully to global issues without holding official positions. It shows that credibility can be built through action. It shows that consistency matters. Now, let's also reflect on the emotional dimension of this, because humanitarian work is not just about strategy or structure. It is about people. It is about empathy. It is about understanding the human experience behind the headlines. And this is something that comes through in Prince Harry's approach. His engagement is not distant. It is not detached. It is grounded in a recognition of human impact. And that is what makes it resonate. Now, as we move toward the final part of this discussion, let's bring everything together. Prince Harry's presence in Ukraine is not just a moment, it is part of a pattern of consistent engagement, a pattern of humanitarian work, a pattern of showing up where it matters. And Professor Tim Wilson's analysis recognizes that pattern. It identifies the qualities that define it. It highlights the elements that align with statesmanship. And it provides a perspective that goes beyond surface-level commentary. So this is not just about praise, it is about acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of consistency, acknowledgement of credibility, acknowledgement of meaningful engagement. And that is what stands out here. Not the noise, not the reactions, but the substance, the pattern, the alignment. So as we close, let's reflect on what this really represents. It represents the power of consistent action. It represents the importance of presence. It represents the value of recognition grounded in thoughtful analysis. And it reinforces the idea that meaningful work does not go unnoticed. Prince Harry continues to demonstrate a commitment to humanitarian engagement that is visible through his actions. And Tim Wilson has provided a perspective that highlights that commitment in a meaningful and insightful way. So thank you to Professor Tim Wilson for that recognition. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to engage with this discussion. If you found this meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and stay engaged.